Welcome to day 3 of GAAMAC IV, the global meeting of global action against mass atrocity crimes. My name is Claire Dool and I'm your Master of Ceremonies. So welcome to all of you who are joining us from far and wide. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. So do put comments in the chat and questions in the Q&A. Also, of course, it would be great if you could tweet. So that's using hashtag prevention pays off or the GAAMAC handle at GAAMAC_.org. So that would be wonderful. So let's just have a look at some of the memorable moments from yesterday and the things that were tweeted about around the world. So the discussion yesterday that the GAAMAC chair moderated was on addressing hate speech and preventing discrimination in the European context and in the international context. And we heard from the president of the Swiss National Commission Against Racism, Martin Brunschwig-Graf, who said, monitoring hate speech is key to fighting it. You need to collect and keep it in a database and then decide how to react. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to preventing hate speech. Nana Kruse, senior advisor at Human Rights Denmark, said a big issue was underreporting of hate speech and securing convictions. The police, though, she said, are now better equipped to respond to complaints of hate speech. Elżbieta Kozłowska-Pasha, senior legal advisor at the OSCE, said minorities, women, and women from minority groups are the most targeted, highlighting the need for better integration efforts so that they can really participate in political and socio-economic life. George Amoah, Executive Secretary of the Peace Council of Ghana, told us that the Peace Council had reached out to religious, traditional leaders, young people, the media and politicians to ensure that the 2020 elections were held peacefully. And he said it worked and that we made a difference. The coordinator at the Inter-American Institute of Human Rights, Eduardo Bertoni, said, we need punitive measures that prohibit hate speech and non-punitive measures such as public education policies. And Vititit Muntaborn, professor at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, made many passionate interventions. He said that the COVID-19 medical lockdown led to a clampdown on political rights. He said half of the countries in Asia were non-democratic and that their laws and policies that claim to address hate speech must be rigorously checked against international standards. So those were some of the tweets that were circulating about the panel discussions. Many of you also attended one of the 5 workshops that took place yesterday, and here are some of the highlights on the Miro board. And you can see, I think what was interesting here to the question, is education the answer? Most definitely yes, but that teachers needed more training, and they needed training perhaps in understanding some of their own unconscious biases when addressing hate speech in the classroom. So lots of key takeaways from that one, which I think is great. So the next Miro board that we have was good practices to address the rights for all in addressing hate speech. And there was a really very clear message, you can see it at the top here, about the fact that most of LGBTI discrimination is based on assumptions of either spiritual or moral corruption. And this correlates with the rise in ultra-conservative discourse. And the evidence shows that when hate speech goes unpunished, violence and discrimination against these groups goes up. So as you can see, that was a workshop where there was a very dynamic discussion about good practices to address the rights for all in addressing hate speech. Then the workshop about interreligious dialogue and prevention of hate speech, obviously absolutely key. Everybody saying that you've got to bring people together in these interreligious councils, and that was absolutely key, I think, there in that workshop that was held yesterday. Let's move on then to the workshop on vectors of hate speech and incitement. We've heard a lot about social media, I think, over the last few days and their role in countering, but sometimes also amplifying hate speech. And I think what was interesting here was the comment that, of course, what may be considered offensive in one country is not considered offensive in another. So it's really important to take these regional differences into consideration. And then finally, there was this workshop on ethnic minorities and religious minorities. A lot of focus here on the Roma and the discrimination against them, with the idea that the laws have improved, but segregation still exists. And the fact that there's a need not only for government and civil society to take action, but also the private sector. And I think most probably there is a need to hear more from the private sector on addressing hate speech and discrimination generally. So those are some of the highlights from yesterday, the workshops and the panel discussions. There's going to be a very interactive panel discussion that the chair of GAAMAC is going to moderate in a moment. But before we go there, let's hear from the Foreign Minister of Tanzania, Liberata Mulamula, who has this video address for us.
Members of the steering group of GAAMAC, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all, and for others, I think it's afternoon, evening, good evening. I feel privileged and honored once again to join you today, not only as a GAAMAC African Working Group patron, but also as the Minister for Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation of the United Republic of Tanzania. Dear colleagues, distinguished participants, it is satisfying for me to see the continuation of our engagement in this area of atrocity prevention, especially in times like these when the world is busy grappling with the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. During such a time, the focus of the world changes, the priorities of states change, resources are diverted, and it is possible during this time some of the indicators that can lead to mass atrocities are not given adequate attention. I therefore commend the commitment shown by GAAMAC in convening us today. On behalf of the government of the United Republic of Tanzania, I wish to reiterate our commitment to join global efforts to prevent atrocities, and of course, with our commitment to prevent genocide. I call on continued collaboration with GAAMAC and all stakeholders in achieving our common objective. I thank you for your kind attention and wishing you all successful deliberations. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, the Foreign Minister of Tanzania there, with words of encouragement and commitment to GAAMAC. So with no further ado, I'd now like to hand over to the chair of GAAMAC, Silvia Fernández de Gurmendi, who is going to moderate the next panel discussion. Silvia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you for the giving us an update of the very interesting moments that we had yesterday and an extremely busy and interesting agenda. So thank you for these updates. And dear participants, welcome to today's dedicated session of GAAMAC on the GAAMAC's Regional Thematic Initiatives. These initiatives are a crucial component of our community. So we will start with an introductory panel, which is entitled Shaping Atrocity Prevention from the Ground Up, Good Practices from GAAMAC Regional Initiatives and Ways Forward. We are going to discuss today and highlight through this introductory panel the track record and added value of GAAMAC regional working groups in supporting and strengthening national atrocity prevention efforts and mechanisms. I am extremely pleased to be accompanied by two strong GAAMAC leaders. Ms. Mo Bleeker, who needs no introduction. You all know Mo. She was GAAMAC's former chair and currently an advisor to GAAMAC. Then we have Justice Jamila Mohammed, who is the chair of the Africa Working Group and chairperson of the Kenya National Committee on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, War Crimes, Crimes Against Humanity, and all forms of discrimination. Because of the time difference, our distinguished colleagues from the Americas Working Group and the Asia Pacific Study Group are not physically present with us today, but they were kind enough to send us pre-recorded messages. We will then see a video message from Ms. Brisna Kayaks, Gender Coordinator Impunity Watch of Guatemala, which is a GAAMAC partner, and she will give us an overview of the America Regional Initiative work. And then we have also a video from Cecilia Jacob, Deputy Head of Department of International Relations of the Coral Bell School of Asia Pacific Affairs, Australian National University, who will give an overview of the Asia Pacific Study Group's work, which focuses precisely on hate speech. So warm welcome to all of you. And we will start with Mo. As a former GAAMAC chair, maybe Mo could tell us a little bit how these regional initiatives came about. Why I said they were a crucial component, but you could tell us why they are a crucial component for GAAMAC as a vehicle to engage state in atrocities prevention. So GAAMAC, so Mo, you are most welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Voila. Do you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Silvia, dear Jamila, dear viewers, and dear community of practice of GAAMAC. I'm so happy to be here, and congratulations for the work done until now. Well, I would like indeed to recall some of the historical steps that led to the creation of this idea of regional working group. Before, maybe let's recall that before GAAMAC was created, you and me initiated as Minister of Foreign Affairs that we realized in Argentina, Tanzania, Switzerland, and Cambodia until 2012. And remember that in this time, in each of the region, there was strong expressions of we want prevention to be localized. It's not in the UN. And we need also to shape prevention from the ground and government. They gave several examples. And you may remember, Silvia, that Professor Matarolo at this time, who is no more among us, but was so engaged and told us about the investigation commission from UNASUR after the Pando massacre that avoided really an escalation that could lead to atrocity. You remember also the initiatives in the peace agreements that Tanzania had been so involved in, notably through the former President Mkapa in the region. And remember also the Special Tribunal in Cambodia and the Center for Documentation. So these were somehow statements made from the region saying, hey guys, if I can say it like this, we are already practicing prevention. Maybe we're not calling it like this. And this is what was missing. And I think this is a big, I would say, understanding after these 4 regional meetings, is that we need a joint label. We need a kind of joint understanding of what we are doing. And this is what, and I will come back to it, this is what GAAMAC brought in. Huh? And this is pushed by that we decided also to create GAAMAC. Another element was important is at this time, remember that in the UN, the international community was very divided. The ones promoting responsibility to protect, or the responsibility to protect, while I don't remember exactly the exact wording, the ones working on prevention of genocide, on protection of civilians, and you name it, and even the ones only working on dealing with the legacy of Holocaust and genocides. So simply said, I think that all these elements, the call from the region to own and to really realize in a cooperative mood initiatives of prevention and define and shape how prevention on the ground could happen, plus the division and the difficulty to become concrete, is at the origin of GAAMAC in 2013. And it immediately allowed this very diverse community who needed to make a kind of qualitative step, I believe, to join efforts under the same label of atrocity prevention, with everyone keeping its identity. We also jointly declared that prevention shall happen now on the ground in each of our country, no more only a story of the global south. It happens everywhere. Ownership is key. Understanding of and embracing the local history, culture is absolutely crucial to be effective and efficient. It's important to generate ownership and ensure sustainability of prevention policy, and that can be only done when it's owned and really led by a national actor. So we also said, and I know I have two more minutes, something very important, that no society is immune and that prevention begins at home. So de facto, the idea of the initiatives on the ground and regional initiatives was and is in the DNA of GAAMAC. And it was already there since the very beginning. This was the missing piece. So we know that we cannot prevent atrocity just by speaking and emitting resolutions in New York and Geneva or Vienna. That's basic, right? So now I wish to pay tribute really to Minister Liberata Mulamula, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She is, I think, the first one who understood the necessity to begin acting on that. Recall 2006 and 2010 also, when she realized a memorandum for the prevention of genocide undersigned by 12 countries that were part of this alliance. She is the one who first understood that, and there is continuity. Justice Jamila will speak about that, and this is the continuity of the work initiated by Ambassador Mulamula. Later, while we were preparing the last day of GAAMAC 3 or 2, I think in Manila, with Adama, we thought, what could we do to really boost this wish to begin experiences on the ground? And we launched a kind of very fraternal competition among the participants and numerous participants in Manila. And we said, who would have the better idea to make prevention a reality on the ground at regional level would win a prize. I don't remember what the prize was, but the result is the African Working Group with its wonderful manual on prevention, on how to create prevention of atrocity at home. So I think it's very concrete, and these regional initiatives are, in a nutshell, cooperation between state and civil society and experts to begin, based on challenges that are happening in the region, efforts to address these accepted existing challenges that are existing in the regions, fitting with the local culture, fitting with the national policy and the legal framework. We have now three kinds of initiatives, Silvia. The Africa Working Group, as I said before, and Justice Jamila will much more develop on that with their manual on best practices for the establishment of national mechanism. The America Groups is doing something fundamental. They are applying in their studies a gender lens prevention and atrocity prevention. We will hear them after. And the Asia Pacific Study Group is working on good practices in documenting and addressing hate speech in the region. Some have more governments in it, some have less or no government in it, as for now, but all this is work in progress. I hope, dear Silvia, that a European group will emerge during this meeting. It would be indeed a really important signal, namely that it yet really understood that atrocity prevention is an issue for the global planet and not only for the global south. And that prevention begins at home. And we have seen with hate speech, incitement and discrimination, how important it is first, and this is coming out of the first day's meeting, we need to develop a common understanding, a conceptual framework to approach it, while meanwhile, the regional initiatives are already acting on it, so we can collect that lessons learned and their best practice. So what better can you have? An articulation between a joint conceptual approach and this regional initiative. And this joint conceptual approach that will emerge, that is emerging, should really tap into the work of this regional initiative. So that was it, Silvia, in a nutshell, to begin the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mo, for this very concise and very necessary introduction, and also an important reminder, a very important reminder that GAAMAC, this global action, this global initiative, indeed started by being regional. And so it started with these regional seminars, and then we were coming together to create a global alliance, I would say. And thank you for also for drawing the attention about the importance of combining ownership, concrete and regional initiatives with global, the importance of working together by but also keeping each one identity. And that is extremely important. And also you said something that is extremely important, and maybe we can come back to this. So actually, we will come back to this in the subsequent panels, is how to achieve concrete results. Because how to provide a framework, but then achieve concrete results. And that is exactly what we are trying to do through these regional initiatives. And finally, thank you for reminding us that no society is immune, and that's why it's also important that we do develop these initiatives in all regions. And hopefully we will also have a new one emerging in this GAAMAC IV in the European context. And hate speech is exactly one issue that we see how it's affecting all regions. So thank you for this great introduction. We will come back to some of these issues in the discussion. But before going to Jamila, who will give us a good outlook of the concrete things that are done by the African Working Group, we will, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will now hear from our colleague in Guatemala.
Good evening or good morning, depending from where you are joining us. I'm happy to greet you today in the event GAAMAC IV. And I'm glad to share with you some of the work that we've been doing from the Regional Initiative of the Americas. We have recently finished a policy paper on the prevention of sexual violence during conflicts, and where we draw lessons learned, particularly from Colombia and the Guatemalan experience. Both of these countries went through an armed conflict which greatly affected the lives of women, particularly indigenous women. Sexual violence was used as a weapon of war during these conflicts, but it also highlighted other forms of violence against women. These forms of violence had its root causes in the unequal power relations that exist in both countries. But we also see that these power dynamics are linked to racism and sexism as with other forms of violence and power relations. We have seen that in both countries, after the conflicts or after the signing of the peace, sexual violence continues to be part of the lives of women. It keeps impacting and affecting the lives of women. So it is important to understand the root causes of violence and how it continues after the signing of the peaces and how it continues in post-conflict societies. Victims and survivors of sexual violence have been victims of stigmatizations, and hate speech has been used to sort of promote and trigger violence against them, which continues with the violence against them. So it is important to dismount hate discourse and discrimination ideas against women and indigenous women. From our policy paper, we recommend that we continue to study the root causes, but also have a multidisciplinary approach, a victim-centered approach to guarantee that the needs and the visions of the women or how a violence-free country and society would look like. It is also important to think about innovative ways and creative ways of preventive measures so that violence does not continue to affect the lives of women and indigenous women.
Well, we thank Brisna for this clear example of how going concrete within one of the regional initiatives in the Americas. And now we will hear from Justice Jamila Mohammed. Jamila, building from Mo's remarks, what are the main milestones accomplished by the African Working Group?
Thank you, Judge Silvia, and also Mo. Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure for me to represent the African Working Group, and I would echo what Mo has said. GAAMAC was actually the missing piece, and no country or region is immune to genocide. And we do know that Africa has been seen to have many conflicts and cases of genocide. So it is an honor for me to chair the African Working Group, which falls under GAAMAC. And as mentioned by Mo, the African Working Group was emerged from the Philippines in 2016. This was in GAAMAC II. I was privileged to be a member of that delegation that was in Manila when the African Working Group was emerged and was established through the encouragement to a very large extent by Adama Dieng, who was the former UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. He encouraged us, and Africa Regional Initiative emerged first, as Mo has said. And she wondered what the prize was. I would say the prize is that we have been able to share with the world, particularly Africa, a manual that establishes, that helps states and regional mechanisms establish architectures that are tailor-made to their own particular needs of the different countries. So that, I would say, is a prize. We may not have emerged with any prize as such from the meeting, but having come up with that, with a manual, that manual in itself is a prize. And we are happy with the progress that it has made, because many countries are adopting it increasingly to establish and manage their initiatives. So I would say the African Working Group, it seeks to promote the national atrocity prevention architectures and policies in different countries. And to a large extent, the manual helps us to a great extent in this, in that we're able to help other countries which have not established national mechanisms adopt the good practices and policies and best practices that are are in that manual. So sharing it with the world is actually sharing a lot towards prevention of genocide. We do know in many countries, there is internalization of conflict. So it's important in Africa, particularly, and of course other countries, for countries to work together, because what happens in one country affects other countries. I'm from Kenya, and we do know what's happening to our neighboring countries. What's happening to the countries is affecting us as the neighbors, and we are concerned with what is happening to our neighbors, because what happens to them affects us. And of course, as neighbors and as global citizens, we are concerned by what's happening to them. And oftentimes, those who suffer are the vulnerable, women, children, and other innocent civilians. So it is a matter of concern, and I am happy to be part of this missing link or solution to ensuring that prevention of genocide is put in place. I find that prevention of genocide is quite similar to prevention of pandemics. We are better off preventing. The alternative is unthinkable. The alternative is not something we want to happen to any of us. So we have to march on with prevention. We have to do whatever it takes. It may be difficult to quantify, but I do know that it works. Prevention works. And as the saying goes, prevention is better than cure. In this particular case, we do know it's a matter of life and death in many instances. The African Regional Initiative is the eldest of the regional initiatives under GAAMAC. It is robust, and the manual helps make the Africa Regional Initiative very well known and recognized for the role that it does play to many countries. So it actually opens doors for us and markets the Africa Regional Initiative, African Working Group. I thank Ambassador and Minister Liberata for her support. She has continued to engage with us. She is the patron of the African Working Group. She's continued to engage with us and to share her contacts, particularly in the ICGLR, the International Conference of the Great Lakes Region. As Judge Silvia introduced me, I'm the chair of the Kenya National Committee on the Prevention of Genocide, which falls under the ICGLR. It is a committee of 12 member countries that have worked together to ensure that we prevent conflict in the 12 member countries, which is prone to a lot of conflict. The African Working Group's composition is diverse, and I believe the diversity is our strength. It's made up of different actors. We have government, we have genocide prevention, national mechanisms, we have national human rights architecture, and we also have UN treaty bodies who are members. So we have that diversity is really enriching, and it is our strength, which we leverage on to ensure that our reach is wide and also goes deep and covers the wide spectrum in the area of prevention. So having that diversity has helped open many areas for us. Recently, in June this year, the African Working Group was able to support or facilitate and work together with our members from Côte d'Ivoire and some of our members, even from the Kenya National Committee, were on hand to share some of the good work that we do, which includes a genocide prevention legislation. So we have shared with the Côte d'Ivoire, who are considering enacting legislation on genocide prevention, and we were able to work together with 20 newly elected ministers, and that was, in my view, very impactful, because I believe those 20 newly elected members of parliament of Côte d'Ivoire will have a wide reach. And once they're converted and understand what genocide prevention means, or what genocide means and the need to prevent it, I believe it has a trickle-down effect and will cover many, will reach very, very wide. So that particular training, I believe, will go a long way. And eventually, we do hope that Kenya will come up with a genocide prevention bill. It is in the process of enactment. Cote d'Ivoire, as I said, is also considering, and we are continuing our discussions with them to ensure that the different countries go a long way in coming up with the genocide prevention legislation. So the African Working Group has an ambitious roadmap, which includes to bring on board all regions of Africa. We would like to ensure that no one is left behind, because we believe that working together is our strength. You know, we learn from each other, we share good practices, best practices, and lessons learned. So we can strengthen each other, support each other, and work together to ensure that whatever happens in our different countries, we are able to work together and ensure that we prevent genocide happening in our member countries. The African Working Group is made up of 25 members, and it has a reach of 10 countries from Africa. But we are hoping to reach all member states of Africa towards genocide prevention, to be part of African Working Group, and to ensure that they have genocide prevention mechanisms in place, tailor-made to their specific needs and their country situations. So we also encourage member states to accede to the Genocide Convention, because many countries in Africa have not yet acceded or ratified the Genocide Convention. And we are working towards ensuring that more countries accede to the Genocide Prevention mechanism, to the Genocide Convention, and respect it and uphold all its values and requirements. We also facilitate member states to form the national mechanisms. We share good practices. We visit the countries that need our support. And so we have a wide reach, and we are a number of have been very committed members of the African Working Group. So we are ready to help others form their own national mechanisms and to share whatever lessons we have. We also develop and establish linkages with GAAMAC, the other regional initiatives, such as Asia Pacific, Europe, and Latin America, and share best practices. We also create collaboration with initiatives and organizations such as the African Union, the East African Community, EAC, the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West Africa States, the ICGLR, as I alluded to earlier, the UN, including the UN Special Advisor's Office. In fact, the UN Special Advisor was a committed member of the Kenya National Committee. So we are happy to work together. And the UN Special Advisor's Office is actually supporting the Kenya National Committee in the enactment of legislation, and also having peace fora in different hotspots in Kenya. And I know they do that in different countries, including Tanzania. And I know they also support Uganda in the enactment of legislation in Uganda. So we also aim to formulate technical and resource mobilization from different partners, such as the EADB and the European Union, and so that we ensure that we work efficiently to carry out the very wide and important mandate of the GAAMAC African Working Group. Thank you all, and thank you, Silvia. I hope I've answered your question in as much as possible, but I'm happy to take any other questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Jamila. You have really gave us a very, very good description, overview of the immense work that is being done by the African Working Group. And in very concrete ways, you mentioned that the African Group is a robust initiative, and really it is, because and we could hear that you are working in many areas, from the manual to legislation, to promote also ratification for an international treaty, hugely important as the Genocide Convention, and then your linkages with other regional initiatives, but also with regional and international organizations. So this is huge work, and it's very concrete work. So I really commend you for this, and for giving this extremely comprehensive overview. Now we will hear from the study group in Asia Pacific. We will have this video play to learn more about this initiative in this region.
Hello, my name is Cecilia Jacob. I'm a research fellow at the Australian National University. On behalf of the Asia Pacific Working Group of GAAMAC, I'm pleased to present to you the report titled Preventing Hate Speech and Discrimination, Lessons on Promoting Tolerance and Respect for Diversity in the Asia Pacific. The full report can be downloaded from the GAAMAC website. As in many parts of the world, the Asia-Pacific region has experienced the rise of populist and militarized governments, coinciding with the rise in hate speech and incitement to violence. The persecution of ethnic and religious minorities persists in many countries in the region, and sadly, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated many underlying tensions that has lowered tolerance and respect. Hate speech and incitement to violence, when tolerated or promoted by political and religious leaders, is an important risk factor for atrocities. Our team of contributors from across the region have examined 6 country case studies to understand the patterns and dynamics of hate speech, to identify key drivers, and to provide targeted recommendations for combating hate speech. The countries included are Myanmar, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, and Pakistan. Some key findings from the report include: first, legacies of impunity and the construction of historical narratives that denigrate minority groups shape and form the content of hate speech. Accountability for historical grievances is crucial and must include reshaping the narratives of nationhood and belonging when they are exclusionary and discriminatory. Second, legal and governance institutions can determine whether a situation is conducive to hate speech and whether authorities have the capacity to mitigate the escalation of violence. Political leadership must reinforce legal protections and uphold fair process to legitimize existing legal and institutional protections. We offer wide-ranging recommendations for institutional and legal reform and implementation in the report. Third, we show that external pressures from the international community, including governments, international organizations, civil society, and faith-based actors, can yield important outcomes for persecuted minorities. However, in most instances, the international community has paid little attention to episodes of communal violence or systematic violations of the human rights of ethnic and religious minorities. We recommend that members of the international community consistently employ diplomatic and public platforms to call out deeply entrenched patterns of discrimination and targeting within states. Finally, social media is now the key platform for the dissemination of hate speech and incitement to violence in the Asia-Pacific region. State and non-state actors must increase their understanding of how these platforms are being used, and greater regulation is needed to govern hate speech in the digital space. There are many more findings and targeted recommendations found in the report. We hope that you find this report to be a useful resource in your endeavours to strengthen atrocity prevention in your respective countries and institutions. We also thank GAAMAC for their support to bring this report together. Thank you.
Well, we thank Cecilia Jacob for her overview on this very specific initiative in the Study Asia Pacific group. We are going to have the opportunity to have discussions in the breakout rooms that are going to follow this introductory panel. But we have a few minutes left, very few, 3 minutes. So maybe I would like to give the opportunity to Mo and Jamila, if you want to add something or highlight something that could also trigger more discussions in the breakout rooms. Mo or Jamila, who wishes to add something, if you wish. Mo or Jamila, you want to? Yes.
Just in a nutshell, thank you, Justice Jamila. You give us such a good understanding, and I just want to say that if really it becomes possible to multiply these kind of initiatives, then we can really begin maybe to dare to say never again. never again means nothing if we don't act on the ground. And sometimes I even feel we should be ashamed to say never again, because we cannot just have good intentions. We need to practice, and we need to make this a reality. So the regional initiatives are key to this. They are a reservoir of knowledge, of good practice that can inform resolutions, that can inform joint conceptual approaches and all that. And they are the proof that prevention can have concrete results. And we have heard it now. Now, just a little word for Europe. And in Switzerland, for example, we really wish to create a platform for prevention, gathering actors who are working in fields which are important to prevention nowadays. For example, in the field of hate speech, discrimination, and by convening them while they remain totally themselves, doing what they have to do, and trying to conceptualize all this work under the heading of prevention, I think we could make a difference. Then I hope that in GAAMAC V, Switzerland and Michel Gautret, who is here, the president of the Association of GAAMAC, will be able to come and say, hey, I want to present you the work that the Swiss Prevention of Atrocity Working Group is doing. And we have been very effective, for example, on working with youth on preventing hate speech and fake news. That would be extraordinary, a little step, but concrete and meaningful. So that was my little conclusion message.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for again underlying the importance of concrete results. Jamila, do you want to add something?
Thank you, Judge Silvia. Yes, I would add that it's time to move from rhetoric to action. And I believe regional initiatives are key because they work from the ground up, and they work depending on the peculiar circumstances and situations of the different countries. So each country is encouraged to form its own regional initiative or its own initiative, country-specific initiative, and thereafter group together as a region to ensure that genocide and conflicts are prevented in the particular country, depending on its own peculiar circumstances. But as I had said earlier, we are always ready to share best practices. We have the manual. So with all that, we are ready to work together with any member states or any organizations that are ready to start or who would like to start the process of forming national mechanisms for the prevention of genocide. Because again, we repeat, there is no country or region that is immune to genocide. So we must all prepare, whether we have had genocide in our countries or in our regions, we should know that no country is immune. It can creep on anyone. It's a process, but it can happen anywhere. So let's work together to ensure we prevent it the world over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to both of you from these final remarks about going from rhetoric to concrete action. And this is exactly what we hope to have a discussion about in these breakout rooms that are going to start after this. Just like I now invite the participants to choose a link to your preferred session from the chat. If you encounter joining your breakout room any problems, simply try refreshing your page if you have any technical problems. And here you have the different working groups. The Africa breakout room will be moderated by Justice Jamila Mohammed, who you have just heard until now. Please note that this room will have interpretation English, French. Then the Asia Pacific breakout room will be moderated by Ms. Savita Ponde from the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect, who is a member of the steering group of GAAMAC. The Americas breakout room will be moderated by Ambassador Shara Duncan from Costa Rica, member of the steering group as well. Please note this room will have interpretation English, Spanish. The Europe breakout room will be moderated by Mr. Martin Meneke from Denmark, who is also a member of the steering group of GAAMAC. And the thematic breakout room will be moderated by Dr. Jennifer Leaning from the FXB Center for Health and Human Rights, who is also a member of the steering group. So I encourage you to have meaningful, candid discussions and to come back with concrete recommendations for actions, initiatives, and how we can work together in each region to support atrocity prevention. So enjoy your discussions.